Welcome, listeners, to the Hauntline. Tonight we delve into the shadowed corners where history breathes, where the past isn't just a memory, but an active, often unsettling presence. Have you ever stood in a place so steeped in bygone eras that the air itself feels heavy with unspoken stories? A place where the veil between then and now seems almost permeable? My journey into this particular echo began not with a dramatic flourish, but with the quiet turning of a page. I'm a historian by passion, if not entirely by profession. My specialty, or perhaps obsession, has always been the American Civil War. The sheer weight of it, the valor, the tragedy, the nation rent in two. Last autumn, I found myself drawn to Fredericksburg, Virginia, a town whose very soil is saturated with the blood and sorrow of that conflict. I'd booked a room in a quaint bed and breakfast on the outskirts of town, a meticulously restored Federal-style house dating back to the early 1800s. The brochure boasted of its authentic period charm, and it didn't disappoint. Original hardwood floors groaned underfoot like old men weary of their burdens, and the scent of beeswax, old paper, and something indefinably ancient clung to the air. My room, the Lafayette Suite, overlooked a stretch of field that had once been part of the Confederate line during the Battle of Fredericksburg. The first evening was uneventful, filled with the mundane rituals of settling in. I spread my maps and research papers across a mahogany secretary desk, the gas lamps, now cleverly electrified, casting a warm, flickering glow. Outside, the wind sighed through the ancient oaks, a mournful, timeless sound. I remember feeling a profound sense of peace, a connection to the history I so cherished. Little did I know that connection was about to become far more direct. It began subtly, as these things often do. The second night, as I lay in the canopy bed, drifting towards sleep, a peculiar scent wafted into the room. It was faint at first, easily dismissed. Wood smoke perhaps from a neighbor's fireplace, though it was a mild October. But then it sharpened, mingled with an acrid note that pricked my nostrils, gunpowder, and beneath that, something else, damp wool and a faint Swedish smell I couldn't quite place, almost like whorehound candy? I sat up, my heart thrumming a little faster. The window was closed. The main heating for the house was modern, electric. I checked the hallway. Empty, silent, save for the grandfather clock's solemn ticking in the foyer below. Shaking my head, I attributed it to an old house's eccentricities, perhaps phantom smells trapped in the ancient timbers. I tried to dismiss it. But sleep, when it finally came, was restless, filled with fractured dreams of gray uniforms and cannon fire. The next morning, I mentioned it to Mrs. Gable, the kindly, silver-haired proprietor. She smiled a polite, perhaps practiced smile. "Oh, the old house plays tricks, dear," she'd said, pouring me coffee. "Full of drafts and memories, you know." Her eyes, however, held a flicker of something else, something she wasn't saying. I didn't press. But the smells returned that evening, stronger this time, gunpowder unmistakably, and the damp wool, like a uniform soaked by a long, cold rain. And then the whorehound. I found myself pacing the room, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. It wasn't just smells anymore. The air grew cold, a sudden, localized chill that had nothing to do with the ambient temperature of the room. It focused near the window, the one overlooking the dark, empty field. I stood there, peering out into the inky blackness, my breath misting in front of me. Nothing. Just the swaying silhouettes of trees against a star-dusted sky. But I felt it. A presence. The distinct, unnerving sensation of being watched. The third night, I resolved to stay awake. I sat in the armchair by the secretary desk, a book open on my lap, though my eyes scanned the room more than the pages. The grandfather clock downstairs chimed midnight, each stroke resonating through the silent house like a hammer blow. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. The only sounds were the wind and the occasional creak of the house settling. My eyelids grew heavy. Perhaps it had all been my imagination, amplified by the atmosphere of the place. And then I saw him. It wasn't a sudden appearance. It was more like a coalescing, as if the shadows in the corner by the window deepened, thickened, and then resolved themselves into a shape, a human shape. He was tall, gaunt, dressed in a tattered gray uniform. A Confederate soldier. His face was pale, smudged with dirt and exhaustion, his eyes hollow sockets in the dim light. He wasn't looking at me, but out the window, towards the field. He stood ramrod straight, one hand resting on the spectral outline of a rifle, its bayonet glinting faintly. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. My mind reeled, trying to process, to rationalize. A waking dream, a trick of the light. But the cold was back, intense now, radiating from him. And the smell, gunpowder, sweat, damp earth, and that peculiar Swedish scent of horehound. He didn't acknowledge me. He just stood there, a silent sentinel, forever on duty. His posture was one of weary vigilance. I saw the tattered kepi on his head, the worn leather of his cartridge box. Details so vivid, so real, they defied any attempt at logical dismissal. I sat there trembling until the first gray light of dawn crept through the curtains. I didn't sleep. How could I? Sleep was impossible that night. And the next day, I was a wreck, fueled by adrenaline and too much coffee. I avoided Mrs. Gable, unwilling to face her knowing gaze. Instead, I threw myself into research, not the broad strokes of battle strategy, but the minutiae, regimental rosters, casualty lists, local histories of the Fredericksburg area. I had to know. Was he a figment, or was he someone? I spent hours at the local historical society, poring over dusty ledgers and digitized archives. I searched for records of soldiers who might have been stationed near where the B&B now stood, specifically looking for units involved in picket duty. It was late afternoon when I found it. A brief mention in a soldier's diary, an almost throwaway line. Corporal Josiah Davies, 18th Virginia Infantry, took a mini-ball to the chest whilst on picket near the Tanner farm. A good man. Always had a bit of horehound in his pocket for the younger lads. The Tanner farm. Mrs. Gable had mentioned when I first arrived that her house was built on land that once belonged to the Tanner family, Josiah Davies. My blood ran cold. The name resonated with a chilling familiarity, as if I'd known it all along. The whorehound. It was him. I was sure of it. That evening, back in the Lafayette suite, the air was thick with anticipation. I didn't try to read. I just sat, waiting. The smells arrived first, familiar now: wood smoke, gunpowder, damp wool, and horehound. Then the cold gathering by the window, and then Corporal Josiah Davies materialized. This time, I wasn't frozen by fear. A strange sort of calm, or perhaps resignation, had settled over me. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the profound sadness etched into his young old face. He looked no more than 20. The hollows of his eyes seemed to bore into the darkness outside. "Corporal Davies?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. There was no visible reaction, no flicker of acknowledgement. He remained transfixed on the field beyond the glass. But I felt a change in the room, a subtle shift in the oppressive atmosphere. Not a lessening, but a focusing, as if my speaking his name had anchored him, however slightly. "What are you watching for, Corporal?" I asked, my voice a little stronger. "The battle is over. It's been over for a long, long time." He didn't move, didn't speak, but I saw his spectral hand clench slightly on his rifle, his duty. He was still on duty, a picket, watching for an enemy that would never come, guarding a line that no longer existed. I stayed there with him for hours, occasionally speaking to him, telling him about the world outside his window, about the century and a half that had passed. He never responded, never wavered from his post. As dawn approached, he faded once more, leaving me alone with the scent of horehound and an aching sense of sorrow. I checked out of the B&B that morning. As I handed the keys to Mrs. Gable, she looked at me searchingly. "Did you sleep well, dear?" she asked, her voice gentle. I met her gaze. "I think Corporal Davies is still on duty," I said quietly. A flicker of understanding, of sadness crossed her features. "Yes," she said softly. "He is. He's been here as long as my family has owned this house. My grandfather used to say he was the most steadfast soldier he ever knew." She paused. "He doesn't mean any harm. He's just waiting. Waiting for relief that will never arrive, waiting for an order that will never be given, trapped in an endless loop of his final moments, his final duty." I drove away from Fredericksburg that day with a heavy heart. The experience had shaken me, but it had also deepened my understanding of history, of the indelible marks it leaves not just on the land, but on the very fabric of existence. Corporal Josiah Davies wasn't a malevolent spirit, not a terrifying ghoul from a campfire tale. He was an echo, a resonance of a life cut short, a duty unfulfilled, imprinted onto the place where he fell. I often wonder about him, standing his perpetual post in the Lafayette suite, staring out at a field that only he sees as it once was. Does he sense the changing seasons? Does he hear the sounds of the modern world beyond his window, like intrusive whispers from an unimaginable future? Or is he locked forever in that cold, damp night in 1862, the scent of gunpowder and horehound his only companions? Some say ghosts are memories, given form by strong emotion. Others believe they are souls unable to move on. Perhaps they are both. Or perhaps they are something else entirely, something our living minds cannot fully comprehend. What I do know is that Corporal Josiah Davies is real in his own way, a fragment of the past, forever tethered to the present, a silent testament to the enduring power of a soldier's watch. And sometimes, Late at night, when the wind sighs just right, I think I can almost smell the faint, sweet scent of horehound. A reminder that the past is never truly gone. It's merely waiting in the shadows for us to listen. The veil between worlds is thin in places like Fredericksburg, where the echoes of profound human experience linger. Corporal Davies' story is but one of countless such echoes reverberating through time. What stories do the old places in your life hold? What whispers might you hear if you only stop to listen? Thank you for joining me on the Hauntline. If this tale sent a shiver down your spine or made you ponder the mysteries that lie just beyond our sight, please consider sharing it with a fellow seeker of the strange and unexplained. We invite you to like this episode if it resonated with you, and subscribe to the Hauntline for more journeys into the spectral and the supernatural. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next chilling installment. Until next time, keep your ears open to the whispers of the past and tread carefully through those places where history refuses to sleep. This is the Hauntline, signing off.